Do you believe that Zhuge Liang could truly control the forces of nature, arrange mystical battle formations, or even terrify enemies after death? If your answer is yes, then chances are you've been under the spell of romance of the Three Kingdoms for too long. In Luo Guanzhong's novel, Zhuge Liang is more than just a strategist. He's portrayed as a sage with supernatural intellect, capable of altering the fate of the entire realm. But real history tells a very different story. He was indeed a brilliant politician and an exceptional administrator. But was he truly a military genius? What about the inventions attributed to him, like the wooden ox, the repeating crossbow, or the Kongming lantern? Were they really his creations? Now let's uncover the truths about Zhuge Liang that Romance of the Three Kingdoms never told you. Zhuge Liang in Romance of the Three Kingdoms versus historical reality. In Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Zhuge Liang is the ultimate symbol of wisdom, strategy, and perfection. Luo Guanzhong portrayed him as a sage capable of predicting the future, controlling nature, and defeating enemies with unimaginable tactics. His iconic image, holding a feather fan, eyes deep and serene, voice calm and composed, has become legendary across East Asian culture, from novels to films to video games. One of his most famous moments is the Battle of Red Cliffs in 208. In the novel, Zhuge Liang stands on a platform performing a mystical ritual to borrow the east wind, enabling the Sun-Liu alliance to ignite Cao Cao's fleet and turn the tide of war. The southeastern wind arrives exactly on cue, portrayed as if he had summoned nature itself to his command. Another legendary episode is the borrowing arrows with straw boats strategy. When the Shu army lacked arrows, Zhuge Liang sent out straw-covered boats into the river during a foggy night, luring Cao Cao's archers into firing. The arrows embedded in the straw boats, and he collected over 100,000 arrows without losing a single soldier. The brilliance and symbolism of this strategy cemented his image as a mind far superior to any rival. He is also credited with arranging mystical formations such as the Eight Trigrams Formation. In the novel, he sets up an elaborate maze of stones that traps and confuses the Wei army, leading to their destruction. Even after his death in 234 at Wuzhang Plains, he allegedly left behind a final trick, a wooden statue of himself placed on a cart, causing Sima Yi, Wei's most formidable general, to panic and retreat, believing Zhuge Liang still lived and was plotting his downfall. These stories transformed Zhuge Liang into an almost invincible figure, not only winning battles but instilling fear in the hearts of his enemies, even beyond the grave. Luo Guanzhong crafted Zhuge Liang into the ideal image of loyalty and intellect. Every plan and victory is exaggerated to glorify him, convincing readers that he was a transcendent genius beyond the confines of his era. But that's the world of fiction, a picture painted with imagination and admiration, not a reflection of historical reality. In historical reality, Zhuge Liang, 181 to 234, courtesy named Kongming, was the chancellor of the state of Shu Han during the Three Kingdoms period. He was a real historical figure with significant contributions, but not the divine genius portrayed in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. To truly understand him, we must rely on records of the Three Kingdoms, Sangguoji, by Chen Shou, the most authoritative and reliable historical account of this era, rather than the vivid fictional tales of Luo Guanzhong. Let's begin with the Battle of Red Cliffs, the event that cemented Zhuge Liang's fame in the novel. In reality, he was neither the commanding general nor the person who borrowed the east wind. The real credit goes to Zhou Yu, the commander-in-chief of Eastern Wu, who devised the plan and used a naturally occurring southeast wind to ignite Cao Cao's fleet. Zhuge Liang at the time was merely a diplomatic envoy sent by Liu Bei to negotiate an alliance with Sun Quan. Records of the Three Kingdoms notes that Zhuge Liang successfully accomplished this diplomatic mission, but there is no mention of him performing wind-summoning rituals or taking part in the battle's strategic planning. The East Wind story was a literary invention by Luo Guanzhong, likely inspired by folklore and dramatized for narrative flair. Similarly, the famous straw boat tactic to gather 100,000 arrows is also absent from historical records. Neither records of the Three Kingdoms nor any credible source confirms this episode. Some scholars believe the tale is fictional, perhaps loosely inspired by Zhuge Liang's known cleverness in smaller-scale deceptions during wartime. But there is no evidence of such a large, dramatic maneuver. Rather than a military mastermind performing miracles, Zhuge Liang was more accurately a skilled diplomat and organizer who focused on alliance building and logistics rather than battlefield theatrics. The story of the mystical Eight Trigrams Formation is also unfounded. No record in records of the Three Kingdoms mentions Zhuge Liang creating intricate stone battle formations. His northern expeditions against Wei relied more on strategic positioning and supply lines than on any kind of magical or complex formations. As for the tale of the wooden statue scaring off Sima Yi, historical accounts simply state that after Zhuge Liang's death in 234 at the Wushang Plains, the Shu army retreated in an orderly fashion under generals such as Yang Yi. Sima Yi did not pursue them, not out of fear of a statue, but because of his cautious nature and reluctance to attack a disciplined army even after the loss of its leader. The wooden statue legend is a fictional embellishment designed to add mystique to Zhuge Liang's death. More importantly, Zhuge Liang's military record was not the undefeated streak portrayed in fiction. From 228 to 234, he launched 5 northern expeditions to restore the Han and defeat Wei, but all failed. Shu Han, with a population of around 1 million and limited resources, was no match for Wei, which boasted over 4 million people and a vast territory. Despite his full dedication, Zhuge Liang's campaigns did not achieve strategic success. This proves he was not an all-powerful general or invincible strategist, but rather a pragmatic leader working under harsh constraints of the time. This stark contrast between the fictional and historical Zhuge Liang reflects how novels and history view human greatness. In Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he is the idealized icon, flawless, all-knowing, and always victorious through genius. In real life, he was a man of immense talent and undeniable accomplishments, but also someone who faced failure and limitations, constrained by the power of Shu Han and rivaled by formidable opponents like Sima Yi. He was not divine, but a historical figure with brilliance and boundaries. Was Zhuge Liang truly a military genius? In Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Zhuge Liang is portrayed as an undefeated military genius, capable of deploying divine strategies to change the tides of war, from borrowing the east wind to deploying the mystical Eight Trigrams Formation. But historical reality poses a more nuanced question. Was he truly a master of warfare, or simply a gifted leader in other domains? To answer that, we must examine his strengths, weaknesses, and the context in which he operated, based on historical records like records of the Three Kingdoms, Sangguoji, and modern scholarly analysis. Zhuge Liang possessed remarkable military qualities, particularly in army organization, logistics management, discipline enforcement, and strategic use of terrain, all foundational elements of successful campaigns. One of his most notable achievements was the Southern Campaign in 225. After Liu Bei's death, Shu Han faced instability in the southern regions, modern-day Yunnan, Guizhou, and southern Sichuan, where ethnic tribes led by Menghuo rebelled. Zhuge Liang personally led the campaign, facing harsh mountainous terrain, humid climate, and unpredictable guerrilla tactics. Instead of using brute force, he combined military action with what he called a strategy of the heart. According to records of the Three Kingdoms, he defeated the rebels in several engagements and then persuaded local leaders to surrender by securing their interests and offering peace rather than slaughter or coercion. While Romance of the Three Kingdoms dramatizes this with the 7 captures and releases of Menghuo, the historical reality confirms that Zhuge Liang successfully pacified the south, turning it into a secure base for Shu. He installed loyal officials, exploited local resources such as grain, horses, and manpower. This campaign not only demonstrated his command ability, but also his rare skill in combining diplomacy with military strategy. Logistics was another area where Zhuge Liang excelled. He understood that Shu Han's mountainous geography and limited resources made sustained military operations nearly impossible without a robust supply chain. He reformed the tax system in Sichuan, built massive granaries in Hanzhong and Chengdu, and established transport routes through difficult terrain like the Jianghe Pass, a steep and narrow gateway linking Sichuan and Gansu. He utilized innovative transport methods, later mythologized as the wooden ox and gliding horse, to ensure supplies reached the front lines. Sangguoji praises him, Kongming governed his army with strict discipline. Supplies were always sufficient, and his troops never complained. Even in remote or arid regions, his forces rarely faced severe shortages, helping sustain morale, something even his main rival, Sima Yi, reportedly respected. His ability to maintain discipline and inspire his troops was also a major strength. After Liu Bei's death in 223, Shu Han's army suffered from low morale. Zhuge Liang swiftly restored order with strict military codes. He punished violations harshly but rewarded merit generously, establishing a fair and transparent system. He regularly inspected camps, spoke directly with soldiers to understand their needs, and penned motivational pieces like the memorial on sending out troops to rally support for the restoration of the Han. Despite being outnumbered and outmatched by Wei, the Shu army remained cohesive and committed under his leadership, evidence not only of organizational skill, but also of charismatic leadership. He also used terrain effectively in strategy. In the southern campaign, he ambushed rebels by using forests to cut off their supplies. Against Sima Yi, he often chose strong defensive positions, such as Wushang Plains, leveraging high ground to make direct assaults difficult. Though he did not invent mystical formations like the 8 Trigrams, he used geography wisely to offset numerical and material disadvantages, proof of his tactical awareness under tough circumstances. Yet, for all his strengths, Zhuge Liang's battlefield performance lacked the brilliance of direct command victories or decisive engagements. He was not a master of offensive tactics or rapid adaptation in open conflict. A prime example is the Battle of Jiating in 228. He assigned the defense of a strategic location to Ma Su, a promising but inexperienced officer, expecting him to block Wei's advance. However, Ma Su defied orders and camped on high ground, leaving his water source vulnerable. Zhang He of Wei seized the opportunity, cut off supplies, and destroyed the Shu forces. Zhuge Liang later accepted full blame for the defeat, but it revealed his limitations in vetting subordinates and predicting tactical outcomes when delegating key responsibilities. Another key weakness was his conservatism in strategy. He favored cautious, methodical approaches based on logistics and defense, rather than bold offensives aimed at quick victories. When facing Sima Yi, renowned for patience and strong defenses, Zhuge Liang often found himself in drawn-out stalemates. At Wushang Plains, for instance, he set traps hoping Sima Yi would attack, but the latter held firm in his fortresses. The campaign ended indecisively, revealing Zhuge Liang's struggle to break enemy defenses or shift tactics mid-campaign. General Wei Yan once proposed a surprise flanking maneuver through the narrow Ziwu Valley, but Zhuge Liang rejected it as too risky and instead chose the slower, more predictable advance through Hanzhong. This rigidity caused him to miss chances for surprise victories, far from the miracle strategist image from fiction. He was also not adept at real-time battlefield command. Unlike Zhou Yu, who orchestrated the fiery victory at Red Cliffs with brilliant naval and fire tactics, or Sima Yi, who preserved his forces through impeccable defensive strategy, Zhuge Liang relied on meticulous planning and preparation rather than spontaneous adaptation. His battles tended to be defensive or prolonged, lacking in decisive blows. He was more effective as a planner and logistician than as a general leading troops in fast-changing battlefield conditions. So, was Zhuge Liang a true military genius? He was not the invincible genius of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, using supernatural tactics to control outcomes. In reality, he was a highly capable military leader in areas like logistics, discipline, and terrain usage, with the Southern Campaign being his most notable success. However, he lacked the flexibility, decisiveness, and direct battlefield command required to achieve major victories over formidable opponents like Sima Yi. Compared to the myth, he was a cautious strategist, strong in sustaining operations and keeping his army together, but limited in conquest. His military talent was impressive, but not divine. It was a product of his intellect, his times, and his constraints, admirable yet human. Did Zhuge Liang weaken Shu Han? Zhuge Liang is often hailed as the central figure who held the Shu Han state together during its most fragile years following Liu Bei's death. However, some argue that his own policies and decisions inadvertently contributed to the decline of Shu Han, pushing it closer to collapse just decades after his passing. To evaluate this fairly, we must consider both the positive contributions and the unintended consequences of his leadership. Drawing from sources such as the records of the Three Kingdoms, Sangguoji, and modern historical analysis. Zhuge Liang's 5 northern expeditions over 6 years placed enormous strain on Shu Han's limited resources and left long-lasting economic repercussions. Shu Han, home to just over 1 million people, was a small, agriculturally dependent state, especially in comparison to Chaowei, which had over 4 million citizens and a much broader resource base. To sustain large-scale military campaigns, Zhuge Liang mobilized massive quantities of grain, weapons, and labor. He imposed heavy taxes on the population, requisitioned crops and supplies from peasant households, and demanded the construction of granaries and transport networks over treacherous terrain such as the Jiangye Pass and the Qinling Mountains. In the short term, these measures enabled Shu's army to function, but over the long term, they exhausted the economy. Sichuan's farming population, the majority of Shu's citizens, faced relentless taxation and conscription, which gradually reduced agricultural output. Transporting goods across arid northern regions increased costs and drained the central treasury. While Sangguoji lacks detailed economic data, modern historians such as Yi Zhongtian estimate that the northern expeditions consumed nearly all of Shu Han's economic reserves without yielding proportionate gains. When Zhuge Liang died in 234, he left behind an economically weakened state, unable to recover quickly or withstand future crises. The economic burden persisted into the next generation. Officials like Jiang Wei continued the policy of northern expeditions despite lacking sufficient resources. Public discontent over taxes and labor demands steadily eroded support for the regime. By the time Wei launched its invasion in 263, Shu Han lacked the economic capacity to mount an effective defense, hastening the dynasty's fall. The long-term military toll of the northern campaigns was equally significant. Zhuge Liang mobilized tens of thousands of troops, an enormous force relative to Shu's population, sending them across rugged landscapes for prolonged campaigns. Marching through the Qinling Mountains, Gansu's arid lands, and remote highlands exposed soldiers to harsh conditions, disease, and attritional warfare. The army suffered physically and mentally. Each campaign depleted Shu's fighting strength. After the defeat at Jiating in 228, for instance, Shu lost thousands of troops and had to retreat, leaving a gap in experienced manpower. By the time Zhuge Liang died at Wujiang Plains in 234, the military was severely weakened. His successors, such as Jiang Wei, attempted to continue the northern campaigns, but relied on an already depleted force with no time to rest or properly replenish. This attrition led directly to Shu's vulnerability in 263, when generals Deng Ai and Zhong Hui of Wei launched a coordinated invasion. By then, Shu lacked the manpower, morale, and resources to resist effectively. The strain from Zhuge Liang's campaigns had eroded the military foundation of the state, contributing to its rapid collapse. Zhuge Liang's centralization of power also had lasting effects on Shu Han's political system. To execute the northern expeditions, he concentrated all authority in his own hands, controlling military, political, and economic affairs. This effectively reduced Emperor Liu Shan to a powerless figurehead. While this centralization brought stability during Zhuge Liang's lifetime, it created a dangerous precedent. Upon his death, Shu Han was left with a power vacuum. Liu Shan, having never been trained to govern during Zhuge Liang's tenure, lacked the skills to lead effectively post-234. He relied heavily on figures like Jiang Wei, who continued the drain of northern campaigns, and later on corrupt eunuchs like Huang Hao, who manipulated court affairs for personal gain. Zhuge Liang's consolidation of power left no mechanism for checks and balances once he was gone. Without a stabilizing central figure, the court fractured, internal discord rose, and the regime proved incapable of defending itself against Wei's final assault. Moreover, Zhuge Liang's singular focus on war left little attention for internal governance and succession planning. Talented younger officials weren't groomed to replace him, and the emphasis on military campaigns meant that no robust administrative system was developed. After his death, the state lacked both political coherence and strategic direction. Zhuge Liang's northern expeditions, though driven by noble intentions, had profound negative impacts on Shu Han. Economically, they drained the state's resources and alienated the population. Militarily, they wore down the army and left it vulnerable. Politically, they created a leadership vacuum and systemic fragility. By the time Shu Han fell in 263, the shadow of these campaigns still loomed large. So, did Zhuge Liang weaken Shu Han? In light of the long-term effects of the northern expeditions, the answer is yes, not because he lacked talent, but because his ambition exceeded what a small and resource-strapped state like Shu Han could sustain. Zhuge Liang's inventions. Truth or legend? Zhuge Liang is widely remembered not only as a brilliant statesman and strategist, but also as a legendary inventor, especially through his portrayal in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Tales of the Kongming lantern, the repeating crossbow, and the wooden ox and flowing horse have elevated him to the status of a genius inventor in popular culture. But are these inventions truly his creations? Or are they products of myth and centuries of glorification? Let's separate fact from fiction. The Kongming lantern, hot air balloon. The Kongming lantern, a small hot air balloon made from paper and lifted by heated air, is one of the most iconic inventions associated with Zhuge Liang. In Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he is said to have used it as a military tool for signaling or calling for reinforcements during times of crisis. One popular tale recounts that, while besieged by Sima Yi during a northern expedition, Zhuge Liang released sky lanterns to signal allied forces, allowing him to escape encirclement. This story reinforces his image as a creative genius, merging science and strategy to overcome adversity. However, when we turn to primary historical sources like records of the Three Kingdoms by Chen Shou, there is no mention of Zhuge Liang inventing or even using the Kongming lantern. The principle behind the lantern is simple. A flame heats the air inside a paper shell, making it lighter than the surrounding air, causing it to rise. With the technological capabilities of the 3rd century, such a device was certainly feasible. Yet historians believe that sky lanterns likely existed during the Eastern Han dynasty, 25 to 220 CE, or even earlier, used primarily in religious rituals or folk festivals, not military communication. Some scholars speculate that Zhuge Liang may have adapted existing lanterns for battlefield use, such as sending signals at night. Still, even this theory lacks concrete evidence. Using sky lanterns in war would require coordinated execution and ideal weather conditions. Light winds, no rain, which would have been difficult to guarantee amid the chaos of warfare during the Three Kingdoms period. Therefore, it's highly likely that the story of the Kongming lantern is a legend embellished by Luo Guanzhong to enhance the mystique surrounding Zhuge Liang rather than a reflection of historical fact. The repeating crossbow, Lianzhu Nu. The Lianzhu Nu, or repeating crossbow, is another famed invention often attributed to Zhuge Liang in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The novel portrays it as a supreme weapon, capable of firing multiple arrows in rapid succession, giving Shu Han an overwhelming advantage in battle. According to the story, Zhuge Liang upgraded the traditional crossbow into a rapid-firing machine, significantly enhancing the army's firepower against Wei and Wu. This image not only glorifies his military ingenuity, but also casts him as a brilliant military engineer who revolutionized warfare. However, historical records paint a different picture. The repeating crossbow was not a new invention in Zhuge Liang's time. Chinese historical texts show that such weapons existed as early as the Warring States period, 475–221 BCE, and the Qin army had used them effectively during the Wars of Unification under Emperor Chen Shou. By the time of the Three Kingdoms, repeating crossbows were already standard equipment in many armies, especially in Wei and Wu, which had strong traditions of arms manufacturing. Records of the Three Kingdoms, Sanguozhi, does not mention Zhuge Liang inventing or designing the repeating crossbow, although it does reference Shu forces using strong crossbows during the northern expeditions. That said, given Zhuge Liang's known talent for logistics and organization, it's plausible that he may have improved upon existing designs to better suit Shu's needs, perhaps increasing range, accuracy, or firing speed. Secondary texts like Wei Shi Chunkyo mention Shu's effective use of crossbows in battles against Wei, though it's unclear whether Zhuge Liang personally contributed to the design or simply utilized available technology well. In the end, the idea of a divine repeating crossbow capable of turning the tide of war, like in the novel, is clearly an exaggeration. While Zhuge Liang may have refined or deployed such weapons skillfully, the myth of him inventing an entirely new game-changing crossbow is more a tribute to his legendary status than a reflection of historical fact. The wooden ox and flowing horse, fact or fiction? The wooden ox, Munyu, and flowing horse, Liuma, legendary self-moving wooden carts, are perhaps the most iconic inventions attributed to Zhuge Liang in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. According to the novel, he designed them to navigate the treacherous terrain of Sichuan and Gansu, allowing Shu forces to transport supplies during the northern expeditions without relying heavily on manpower or pack animals. In the story, even Sima Yi was astonished by these devices and attempted to replicate them. Without success, the legend transformed the wooden ox and flowing horse into ancient robots, further elevating Zhuge Liang's mythic status as a mechanical genius. However, historical records present a more grounded perspective. In the Records of the Three Kingdoms, Sangguoji, Chen Shou notes that Zhuge Liang improved transportation tools called wooden ox and flowing horse to support logistics during his campaigns. Yet there is no indication that these were self-propelled machines. Most modern historians agree that they were likely simple carts or wheelbarrows, perhaps with large wheels and lightweight frames designed for easy movement along narrow mountain paths. Some theories suggest they could be pulled by oxen or horses, optimized for carrying larger loads through the difficult terrain of Shu Han. The technological level during the Three Kingdoms era was far from capable of creating truly self-moving vehicles in the modern sense, i.e., machines that function without human or animal effort. Instead, these tools reflect Zhuge Liang's logistical brilliance. He refined and adapted existing technology to solve real problems, such as transporting food and supplies through mountain passes like Zhangye and the Qinling Range. While not revolutionary inventions, they were practical and effective innovations that enabled sustained military campaigns under harsh conditions. In the end, the inventions attributed to Zhuge Liang, Kongming lanterns, the repeating crossbow, and the wooden ox and flowing horse are best understood as a blend of fact and fiction. He may have improved or cleverly utilized existing tools for military and logistical purposes, but he was not their original creator. Romance of the Three Kingdoms dramatically amplified his contributions, turning practical adaptations into legendary breakthroughs and portraying him as a supernatural polymath. In truth, Zhuge Liang was a pragmatic leader, an adaptable and inventive mind working within the limitations of his era. He was not a divine inventor, but rather a brilliant human being. These embellished tales don't diminish his legacy. They simply show how later generations mythologized a man of remarkable talent, making him larger than life. The wooden ox and flowing horse, fact or fiction? The wooden ox, Munyu, and flowing horse, Liuma, legendary self-moving wooden carts, are perhaps the most iconic inventions attributed to Zhuge Liang in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. According to the novel, he designed them to navigate the treacherous terrain of Sichuan and Gansu, allowing Shu forces to transport supplies during the northern expeditions without relying heavily on manpower or pack animals. In the story, even Sima Yi was astonished by these devices and attempted to replicate them without success. The legend transformed the wooden ox and flowing horse into ancient robots, further elevating Zhuge Liang's mythic status as a mechanical genius. However, historical records present a more grounded perspective. In the Records of the Three Kingdoms, Sangguoji, Chen Shou notes that Zhuge Liang improved transportation tools called wooden ox and flowing horse to support logistics during his campaigns. Yet there is no indication that these were self-propelled machines. Most modern historians agree that they were likely simple carts or wheelbarrows, perhaps with large wheels and lightweight frames, designed for easy movement along narrow mountain paths. Some theories suggest they could be pulled by oxen or horses, optimized for carrying larger loads through the difficult terrain of Shu Han. The technological level during the Three Kingdoms era was far from capable of creating truly self-moving vehicles in the modern sense, i.e., machines that function without human or animal effort. Instead, these tools reflect Zhuge Liang's logistical brilliance. He refined and adapted existing technology to solve real problems, such as transporting food and supplies through mountain passes like Zhangye and the Qinling Range. While not revolutionary inventions, they were practical and effective innovations that enabled sustained military campaigns under harsh conditions. In the end, the inventions attributed to Zhuge Liang, Kongming lanterns, the repeating crossbow, and the wooden ox and flowing horse are best understood as a blend of fact and fiction. He may have improved or cleverly utilized existing tools for military and logistical purposes, but he was not their original creator. Romance of the Three Kingdoms dramatically amplified his contributions, turning practical adaptations into legendary breakthroughs and portraying him as a supernatural polymath. In truth, Zhuge Liang was a pragmatic leader, an adaptable and inventive mind working within the limitations of his era. He was not a divine inventor, but rather a brilliant human being. These embellished tales don't diminish his legacy. They simply show how later generations mythologized a man of remarkable talent, making him larger than life. Zhuge Liang through the eyes of posterity. Zhuge Liang is not merely a historical figure from the Three Kingdoms era. He has become a timeless cultural icon, revered, worshipped, and immortalized in countless forms of art, from literature and theater to film and video games. His image has transcended China's borders, influencing East Asian countries such as Japan, Vietnam, and Korea. Yet perceptions of him have varied greatly, shaped by era, culture, and purpose. From mythologized brilliance in popular culture to more grounded, critical evaluations by modern historians. So how has posterity truly viewed Zhuge Liang, and what does that say about the man behind the myth? A symbol of loyalty and wisdom in China, Zhuge Liang is hailed as the embodiment of loyalty and intellect, two virtues central to Confucian ideology. After his death in 200 V4 at the Wushang Plains, he was enshrined at the Wuhao Shrine in Chengdu, Sichuan, a sacred site visited by thousands each year. There he is honored not only for his intelligence, but for his unwavering loyalty to Liu Bei and his commitment to restoring the Han dynasty. His memorial on sending out troops, Chu Shu Biao, written before launching a northern campaign, is considered a literary and moral masterpiece, especially for the iconic line, "I devote myself with every fiber until death do I rest." These words immortalized him as a paragon of selfless service and national devotion. Zhuge Liang's reverence extends beyond the elite and into Chinese folk culture. He appears in oral tales, proverbs, and local festivals. In regions such as Sichuan, Yunnan, and Hubei, temples dedicated to him attract worshippers seeking wisdom, luck, and protection. He is remembered not only as a clever tactician, but as a sage who understood the human heart, an ideal of moral virtue to which many aspire. In Japan, Zhuge Liang left a lasting mark on samurai culture and feudal military philosophy. During the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, he was admired by leaders and strategists as the ideal military advisor, calm, wise, and fiercely loyal. He featured in kabuki plays, manga, and military treatises, often depicted holding his signature feather fan, a symbol of intellect and authority. Samurai saw him as a model for honor and principle, someone who upheld integrity even in inevitable defeat. In Vietnam, Zhuge Liang was embraced in folk literature and oral storytelling. Though his legend came primarily through Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he became a relatable figure, often seen as a benevolent sage who helped others through cleverness and moral guidance. His image was adapted with local cultural elements, making him both majestic and down-to-earth, less deified than in Chinese lore, yet deeply respected. A pop culture legend, Luo Guanzhong's Romance of the Three Kingdoms, catapulted Zhuge Liang into global recognition, shaping his identity as a superhuman genius in popular culture. From the pages of fiction, he leapt into film, anime, and video games, always portrayed as the unrivaled mastermind of war and wisdom. In John Woo's Red Cliff, 2008, he is depicted as elegant and serene, with a deep voice and uncanny foresight on the battlefield. In video games like Dynasty Warriors and Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he's the iconic strategist, directing battles like a grand conductor, with his feather fan, sage dialogue, and commanding aura. This pop culture version of Zhuge Liang has etched itself into the public imagination, leading many to believe he was a supernatural genius who could bend fate with his intellect. While these portrayals celebrate his brilliance, they also greatly exaggerate his actual achievements, creating a gap between the fictional myth and the historical man. Yet this myth-making is precisely what has kept his name alive for centuries. Modern historians' perspective. While popular culture tends to mythologize Zhuge Liang, modern historians provide a more balanced and realistic view. Scholars acknowledge his excellence as a politician, administrator, and long-term strategist, but stop short of calling him a military genius as portrayed in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Drawing from Sangguoji and other historical sources, researchers like Rafe de Crespigny argue that his greatest success lay in stabilizing Shu Han during its most vulnerable period after Liu Bei's death. His southern campaign in 225, economic reforms in Sichuan, and logistical genius during the northern expeditions are standout achievements. However, scholars also highlight his shortcomings. From 228 to 234, Zhuge Liang launched 5 northern expeditions, each meticulously planned but ultimately unsuccessful against the superior forces of Wei under Sima Yi. As de Crespigny notes, Zhuge Liang had great vision, but lacked the realism to alter Shu Han's destiny. He was a brilliant administrator more than a military genius. Modern Chinese historians such as Yi Chongtian echo this view, suggesting that his myth has overshadowed the contributions of others, like Zhou Yu, Lu Su, and even Sima Yi. They emphasize that Shu Han's decline was not solely due to external pressures, but also to Zhuge Liang's overly conservative strategies and overambitious northern campaigns, which drained the state's limited resources. Nevertheless, few deny his influence. Zhuge Liang remains a symbol of intelligence and loyalty, even if those virtues did not always lead to victory. Historians do not diminish his legacy, they simply place him in a realistic light. A man of immense talent operating within the constraints of his era, not an invincible saint. A legend of many faces, Zhuge Liang in the eyes of posterity is a blend of history and myth. To the people, he is an enduring icon of loyalty and wisdom, an ideal to aspire to. In popular media, he is a tactical superhero wielding unmatched intellect. But to scholars, he is a pragmatic leader who made profound contributions, but also costly miscalculations. This multifaceted image doesn't detract from his legacy, it enhances it, making him one of the most fascinating and debated figures in East Asian history. Looking back on Zhuge Liang's life, we find a layered character, an outstanding politician, an efficient manager, but not quite the military genius Romance of the Three Kingdoms made him out to be. He left a deep imprint on history and East Asian culture, yet his prolonged northern campaigns arguably weakened Shu Han. The inventions associated with his name, like the Kongming lantern and the wooden ox, are more legend than fact. Still, whether praised or scrutinized, Zhuge Liang remains an extraordinary historical figure whose unmatched dedication to duty stands out across time. But the question lingers, was Zhuge Liang truly a military genius, or simply the product of centuries of myth-making? What do you think? Was Zhuge Liang a once-in-a-lifetime talent, or a legend shaped by time and storytelling? Let us know in the comments below.